Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. Welcome to this eighth session of self-improvement through the Quran series. We have begun this in this holy month in order to remain connected with the text of the Quran. Remember, one of the greatest spiritual fodders that we can ever imagine is this God connection. And in this month of Ramadan, this God connection can really bear us a lot of fruit, especially if we are more attentive to the Word of God. And the Quran, as you know, is the fodder for our soul. It is the nourishment of our soul, and a soul which is not being fed with this nourishment often dies away. And a soul which is fed with this nourishment it becomes strong. And when a soul becomes strong, it means that the decision to take the right path and to decision to shun evil becomes easy. So let me share today's verses with you. They are in fact in continuation with the previous day's verses. So we were studying Surah Luqman, and we were actually looking at the advice which was given to Luqman's son by his father at the time that he was handing over his leadership to his son. And we had seen that Luqman, as a sage, as a person, as a wise person of Arabia, was looked up by all Arabs, the idolaters. And by citing his example, the Quran is actually telling the idolaters of Arabia that, remember, the religion which is being taught by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the basics of this religion is no different from what Luqman taught ages ago. And so therefore his basic statute from which he started off this advice regarding his child was la tushrik billah, do not associate partners with God. And this becomes very meaningful in the time of the revelation of the Quran, because all the Arabs, all the Bani Ismail, the Ishmaelites, they were incriminated with very heinous forms of polytheism. So they are being reminded that, look, your own and someone that you looked up to, he never ever advocated polytheism. He was a pure monotheist, and you always looked up to his teachings. So just be reminded that what he said is no different from what the Prophet is saying today. So continuing with this counsel and advice, we have these words now, which now make up verse 16 to 19. So the words are, Ya bunayya إنها إن تك مثقال حبة من خردل فتكن في صخرة أو في السماوات أو في الأرض يأتي بها الله إن الله لطيف خبير. So son, the fact is that if a deed is equal to even the grain of a mustard seed, then whether it is in a small mountain pass, or is in the heavens or in the earth, God shall retrieve it. Indeed, God is discerning. He is aware of everything. So one of the things which the idolaters would doubt would be the knowledge of God, the nature of God's knowledge. And they would contend that how could God have knowledge of so many things which go on in secret, and so many things would be absolutely minuscule or very minute, and how can he keep account of billions and billions of people, and of course their deeds, and not only their deeds but also their intentions. So Luqman is reminding them of the power of the Almighty, and he's telling his son that, look, even if the deed is as small as a mustard seed. Now, a mustard seed is a very, very tiny, minuscule thing. And what he is telling his son is that even if it is as small as a mustard seed, and it is hidden in a small mountain pass, or is in the heavens or the earth, wherever it is, God is going to retrieve it. He is going to play that deed before you. He is going to bring it before you on the day of judgment. So don't think that you can hide from God. So it is this all-embracing nature of God's knowledge, which is once again brought to light by Luqman in this advice. And it gives us this assurance, and also it makes us a little fearful of the Almighty as well. The assurance is that even if we do a very small deed, but it's a good deed, then we should not think that it's not going to be in God's notice. The smallest of deeds will be in his notice. And similarly, we should be fearful of him, because even if a deed is done in private and hidden and is an evil deed, and it's maybe a very small one, even then it's going to be in God's notice. So these words are both an assurance, and also they are a threat to all of us, that we have to fear God, that if we do the minutest of deeds, he is going to be aware of them. And if we do the smallest of good deeds, even then He's going to be aware of them. So we should not worry that they shall not be counted. And then, as is the case with general advice that we find in the Quran, that right after the pillar of Tawheed is mentioned, and right after the rights of the parents have been mentioned, which we discussed in the previous session, the Quran directly comes to the righteous acts which are foremost demanded in religion. And of course, this has found its mention, and they have found its mention in this council of Luqman. So look what he says. He says, Ya bunayya, aqimis salat, wa'mur bil ma'ruf, wanha 'anil munkar, wasbir ala ma asabak, inna zalika min azmil umur. So four things lined up, and all these four things should not be new to the person or to the people who are facing the revelation of the Quran, because they have been reminded of the Quran, from the Quran as well, to adhere to the prayer, and of course to urge what is good, to forbid what is evil. And of course, the Quran has on many occasions said that whatever mishap or calamity befalls you, if a person remains steadfast on it, then this is something which you should do. So all these 4 points which Luqman has made here, again, the idolaters are being told that remember this prophet who's come before you, whatever he has been asking you to do, it should not be a cause of surprise, because Luqman centuries ago had the same demands from you. And this also shows that the prayer was an age-old institution. It was not begun at the time of Quran's revelation. It was a ritual that had been adhered to by all prophets of God. We know from the history of the prayer, which is mentioned in the Quran and in the Bible also, that it started off right from Adam. And we also know from a narrative that this prayer was offered 5 times a day by all prophets of God. Of course, the utterances would be different depending upon the scripture they would be reading, but the postures and the timings and the total number of prayers were always the same. So all that Luqman is telling them is that aqim as-salat, adhere to the prayer. Now, be diligent in the prayer, which means that you must abide by the timings of the prayer, you must be punctual in the prayer, you must be regular in your prayer, and you must pay attention in the prayer. So all these words or all these meanings are encompassed in this small word of aqim as-salat. Be diligent in the prayer, be aware that this is something which is of foremost importance in one's deeds. And wa'mur bil ma'ruf wanha 'anil munkar, that as far as your own life is concerned, it does not merely end with your own self. As you are living in a community, and when you live in a community, the right and wrong of that community, you should not be indifferent to it. Your indifference to the right and wrong around you would mean that you don't have any connection with righteousness or falsehood, because all that you care about is your own self. So God tells us, and of course here Luqman is telling his son at the same time, that you must urge other people to do good, and you must forbid them, which means, of course, that in your own circle of influence, if people are under your influence, and if you can say something to them which can positively influence them, and if you can say something to them which can make them abstain from certain evils, then this is something that you have to do. It is like sharing this righteousness and the sense of wrong that all of us have. And then wasbir ala ma asabaka. So there is not a time in this world in which all of us might not pass through some calamity or the other. Every one of us passes through some calamity, some distress, some personal loss. It could be because of sickness, it could be because of financial constraints, it could be because of a loss of someone dear, and several other reasons as well. So we are bound to pass through various calamities. But the Quran tells us, and of course here Luqman in his sublime words of the Quran is repeating the same thing, that wasbir ala ma asabaka, that whatever calamity befalls you, show perseverance on it. Do not get bogged down, because these calamities, they are meant to make you stronger. They are meant to bring you closer to the Almighty. They are meant to make you rise higher. They are meant to make you tough. And many a time God would like to test your mettle, that as far as living in luxurious circumstances is concerned, living in and good circumstances is concerned, everyone is going to be happy. But the real challenge is that we show the same perseverance and happiness as well when we are passing through constrained circumstances, when the seas are rough and when the sailing is not smooth. Even then, we have to thank God, because whatever befalls from himself, of course, something is meant for our own good. All these trials of life, they are meant to lift us. They are meant to make us more tough. They are meant to bring us closer to the Almighty. So this is precisely what Luqman is advising his son. Wasbir ala ma asabak. And then he says, Inna zalika min azmil umur. And it is because these are the tasks which have been emphasized. That these things, I mean, like praying to the Almighty and being diligent in the prayer, forbidding from evil and urging people to do good and showing perseverance in the face of calamities. The Almighty says at the end, and of course, as has been enshrined by these words of Luqman, that Inna zalika min azmil umur. It is because these are the tasks which have been emphasized, that this is something that you have to do in your life. This is part of your life. It is something which governs your life cycle. You just cannot go without it. And then this counsel continues, and it ends actually on these last two verses. And then they start off with, وَلَا تُسَعِّرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ وَلَا تَمْشِي فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ كُلَّ مُخْتَالٍ فَخُورٍ. So this is again something which pertains to our character, it pertains to our behavior, and something that we often come across. So it says that be not indifferent to people. لا تصدر خدك للناس. So تصعر خدك للناس would mean that you just turn away your shoulder from that person and you just ignore that person and you think that he's someone inferior to us. So this is one of the biggest challenges that we face, that at times our own ego gets the better of us and we regard ourselves to be superior to others. And this is the biggest form of arrogance that we can think of, that we walk on the earth created by God in a way as if we are the only ones or the only creatures who are liked by him and the rest have no significance at all. So the Quran tells us, وَلَا تُسَعِّرْ خَدَّكَ لِلنَّاسِ. Don't be indifferent to people. Don't think that they are inferior to you. Everyone has been created by God. Everyone has the same status before God. Everyone is equal in the eyes of God. And if there is any difference, it is on the basis of piety, and that only God knows. You cannot have any idea of a person's piety. So don't show this indifference. It amounts to arrogance. And the very next part actually tells us how this arrogance is expressed. And that is, walk not arrogantly on the land, because God does not like the arrogant and the conceited. So when a person thinks of himself to be superior, when he is full in his head, and he thinks that, well, I am the only person who has been blessed by the Almighty, then quite naturally, one of the most prominent reflections of this feeling or this state or this emotion, it manifests itself in one's gait, in one's style of walking. And the way one walks is like the walk of a ruffian or a rogue, who thinks that, everything is his, he controls everything. So the Almighty says, and of course Luqman enshrines this in his speech to his son, لا تسعر خدك للناس ولا تمشي في الأرض مرحا. Don't walk arrogantly in the land, because God does not like the arrogant and the conceited. And then وَقْصِدْ فِي مَشْيِكَ وَغْزُزْ مِنْ صَوْتِكَ إِنَّ أَنْكَرَ الْأَصْوَاتِ لَصَوْتُ الْحَمِيرِ. Be moderate in your gait and keep your voice toned down. In reality, the most hideous of voices is the braying of the donkey. So instead of walking proudly and conceitedly, the Quran tells us, waqsud fi mashika. Be moderate. You should walk on God's earth as if you are an unassuming person, as if you are a down-to-earth person. It should be a moderate walk. It should not reflect your vanity and pride and conceit. And not only that, your voice should also be moderate. وَغْزُزْ مِنْ صَوْتِكَ. It should not be loud and harsh, because as the Quran has just said, إِنَّ أَنْكَرَ الْأَصْوَاتِ لَصَوْتُ الْحَمِيرِ. The most hideous of voices is the braying of the donkey. So don't imitate a donkey by using harsh words and using a loud voice and a loud tone. You must talk in a manner that bespeaks of your own humility Just as one's gait and style of walking reflects one's inner self, in a very similar way, one's tone, one's speech also reflects one's inner self. And God wants this reflection to be a reflection of humility and to be a reflection of the fact that we recognize ourselves to be human beings who can falter and who can err and who regard themselves to be people who always respect other people and regard them to be equal to their own selves. So this brings us to an end to this discussion on this advice which was given to Luqman to his son when he was transferring the reins of his leadership. And this also brings us to an end to today's talk. So I am now available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for a very important reminder about how we should be carrying ourselves. Well, first question for today's session comes from Tariq Javed. Tariq Javed, you may go ahead now.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Dr. Sahab, today we learned that the Salah was there from the beginning and it was 5 times a day.
Right.
But on the other hand, we learned from the Miraj, Rasulullah's Miraj, that when he presented himself to God, it was like 50 times prayer, then it was like 40, then 30. So eventually they were reduced to 5. So that means these narrations are not correct?
No, actually, you have to understand that when we are dealing with the ascension of the Prophet or his night journey, the Quran tells us in Surah Bani Israel, where this incident is mentioned, that this was a spiritual journey. It was not a physical journey. So the words which are mentioned in the Quran are وَمَا جَعَلْنَا الرُّؤْيَا الَّتِي أَرَيْنَاكَ إِلَّا فِتْنَةً لِلنَّاسِ. That this dream that we showed you, in which you traveled from one house of God to the other, was something which was to test people and to try them, because God is now going to hand over the custodianship of both these houses, the Baytullah and the Baitul Maqdis, to him, and this will become a means of trial for the idolaters and for the people of the book. So this is what how the Quran mentions. So whatever is mentioned regarding Miraj or ascension is actually in the vision of the Prophet shown to him. So this vision, actually, when it is looked upon as a vision, we have to understand that all visions are symbolic in nature. They are not to be understood literally. Thus, for example, the vision of the dream which Prophet Joseph saw, in which he saw 11 stars and one sun and a moon prostrating before him. Of course, he knew that this is not that actually the stars were prostrating before him. It was like his brothers and his son and his father and mother becoming subservient to him and coming over to him. As he himself also said that this is, as God also said that this is the interpretation of the dream. So dreams have to be interpreted. So when it was shown to the Prophet that he was going to God, and every time he went to him and he asked for the reduction of the prayers, and ultimately they were stopped to 5, this is a symbolic representation of the fact that the Almighty was actually telling the Prophet that, look, it's basically remembering God, which is very important, and you must remember God all the time. So this remembering of God all the time is reflected in the verse as 50 prayers. And the Prophet said that it's difficult that we remember him all the time, and please reduce this, because as human beings we have, of course we have so many chores to do, we have so many things to do, and it might become difficult for us to remember God all the time. So this remembrance of God basically is symbolized in the fact that there were 50 prayers, and slowly when the Prophet said that, well, remembering him all the time is something that is not possible, that the Almighty said, okay, then you at least remember him on those 5 prayers that you are going to offer. So basically it is this symbolism which is reflected in that vision. So the bottom line is that the whole journey was a spiritual journey. Whatever he saw in that spiritual journey was through a dream, and dreams are not to be interpreted literally, they are to be interpreted symbolically. And the symbolism here is, of course, that a continuous remembrance of God was implied by God himself, and it was reduced as his own an act of his own mercy, that of course mankind would not be able to remember God continuously 24 hours a day, and that was reduced to specific times of the day.
Okay, and the other point is that as we listen and as we read, that the Salah that was there from the beginning, that was changed, altered, distorted, during various times, and then Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, with the advice of the God, uh, told us the correct way how to pray Salah. So the Salah was like not preserved, and their books were not preserved. So can we say like the Quran is now preserved compared to the older books, and the Sunnah is also preserved against the older
Yes,
timing?
that is correct, because you see, these both are the two sources of Islam, and both have been transmitted to us through the perpetuation, which is tawatur, and through the consensus. And these two means of transmission, they yield certitude. So therefore, both the Quran and the established practice of the Prophet has been transferred to us in a manner that it is absolutely certain that whatever we are doing in the form of the Sunnah, or offering in the form of the Sunnah, and reading in the form of the Quran, is precisely what the Prophet had said. So the means of their transmission itself are such, which tell us that yes, this is something that has to be absolutely certain, and something which was directed by the Prophet for us to follow.
Thank you. Baran Nashur, you may have your question now. We don't see Baran's name.
Oh, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
My question was about when God says that we should not walk arrogantly on the earth, or we should not look down upon people. Well, when this happens, it mostly happens inside of our heads, and as like in the form of thoughts. Mm-hmm. But does that mean that our thoughts are also recorded and considered as deeds?
Well, our thoughts are, of course, not considered deeds. All that they are, unless we convert those thoughts into considered intentions, they are not going to be subjected to any scrutiny. So thoughts keep coming to us, and they could be whisperings of Satan, they could be from angels, they could be from God. So all things, they come to us. The real thing is that when you start acting on those thoughts and you make them as your intention, so once your thoughts are converted into intention, and then even then the next step is, after once you make them into intention, then those intentions are converted into your deeds. So these are the levels. I mean, intentions will be counted, of course, and after that, if those intentions are converted into deeds, then this would be a step further, and that should also be counted. But mere thoughts are not going to be counted, because you see, these are things that keep coming to our mind, and basically it's a trial that we have to pass through, that we sift these thoughts, we check these thoughts, and we just follow the ones which are correct. But if we succumb to these thoughts and we start acting and following these thoughts and make them our intention as well, it is then that we shall be held accountable.
Okay, and I also had a question about that, because sometimes when we are in a public area and we are on our own, but we are surrounded by other people, and we want to make dua or talk to God, can we do that then inside our own head without moving our lips? Because it might look very weird to other people that we are crazy or something. So could we?
I mean, these are circumstances, when you face these specific circumstances, these are exceptional circumstances. And if you feel that this could be an instance in which you could be bullied or maybe thought strange of, this is an option that you can adopt. But do remember that the ideal form is something which is beyond that, and whenever possible, you should follow the ideal form.
Thank you. We have a written question, Dr. Shehzad, and they ask if it's compulsory to say Subhana Rabbil Ala in Sajda before making dua.
It is not. You see, whatever we utter in while prostrating, while kneeling, all these are suggestions, all these are recommended words and expressions. We can replace them by similar words and expressions, either in Arabic or in any other language that we are comfortable with. So these are what we call the utterances of the prayer, which are not compulsory. They are recommended. So we can change them. We have been given this liberty to change them. And as I said, they can be changed by other Arabic words or expressions, and even your own language can replace them. And you can say anything. And remember the things that we normally say in the prayer, as the Prophet was once asked that what do we say in the prayer? He said that prayer is nothing but glorifying God and making dua to Him and expressing one's gratitude. So we have these three options: to glorify God at all these instances, we express gratitude to Him, and we make dua to Him. So these three these three types of expressions can be uttered whilst we are kneeling, whilst we are prostrating, and of course when we are sitting in the qa'ada also.
All right, thank you. Ibad Bhatti, you may have your question now.
Assalamu alaikum. So about arrogance, my question was that sometimes when you're new and entering the whole Islam as a new person, or काफी और मेरे दोस्तों के साथ भी होता है. So sometimes you start thinking that since you become closer to Allah, उस चीज की भी एक arrogance आना शुरू हो जाती है. So you think you're better off than people who don't pray and you deserve more than them. So how do you eliminate that arrogance, that thought, so you can become more your prayer and everything can become more pure?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right that at times righteousness itself becomes a cause of arrogance, and people think that, well, I'm so pious and I'm so righteous, and this makes them conceited and arrogant. So I think one of the things that can cut us to size and always make us reminded of the fact that we also can alter and make errors is that we should keep an eye on our faults and our blemishes. And there are plenty of blemishes that we do every day, every 24 hours. If you just look back, there would be things that we might have lied in, we might have made exaggerations, or we might have misreported things, or we might have done something in anger, we might have been rude to our parents. So there are so many things that the most pious of people can still do. So one of the best things to make us normal and humble is to always have an eye, to keep an eye on our faults and to analyze our faults, because this would make us realize that however much we might think of ourselves, we still have these faults, and no one is fault free. Yes, we can try to be fault free or close to fault free, but absolutely exonerating ourselves from any sin is not possible. So the more you look at our faults and blemishes that we have done in the last 24 hours, the more it will become evident that in spite of so many claims to piety, we still have a long way to go.
Thank you. Naveed Irfan, you may ask your question now.
जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम रहमतुल्लाह।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
डॉक्टर साहब, मेरा सवाल तो दूसरा था, लेकिन अभी आपने जो जवाब दिया कि जो नमाज में हम सजदे में सुभान रब्बियल आला कहते हैं, ये ऑब्लिगेटरी नहीं है, तो क्या ऑब्लिगेटरी है और क्या नहीं है, इसका मतलब हमारे पास में दलील क्या है? मतलब ये हम किस बिना पे ऐसा कह सकते हैं कि ये ऑब्लिगेटरी है या ये नहीं?
Right. So you see, the obligatory or the mandatory utterances of the Prophet have been transmitted through tawatur in the congregational prayer, in which the Imam is reading out certain things loudly. And these are just 5 things that he reads out loudly. And as a result, there is a tawatur and consensus on those 5 things. The rest don't have that tawatur and consensus, which automatically means that they are not mandatory. They are recommendations. And those 5, I have repeated them many a time here. I'll do that again. The first thing is to say Allahu Akbar whenever the instance is to say Allahu Akbar, like when you begin the prayer, when you go into the ruku, then you stand up, and of course, at all instances, whenever you say Allahu Akbar, that has to be said in Arabic. It's a mandatory utterance. The second is Surah Fatiha. The third is the Quran that you read after Surah Fatiha. The fourth is Sami Allahu liman hamida. And the fifth is Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. If you recall, these are the 5 instances which every Imam says loudly in congregational prayers. And through tawatur of this prayer, the way it has been offered, they have been handed down to us as mandatory parts of the prayer. So that is how we know that these are the mandatory parts of the prayer. About all the rest, we know that they were never ever given the status of being mandatory, because we know from various narrations of hadith that the Prophet on many occasions said that, well, you can read this if you want to. So thus, for example, we have different narrations. We say that when you open the prayer, you can read this if you want to. You can read Subhanakallahumma. You can read any other prayer. Then he would say that if you're sitting in your attayat, you can read this and you can read that. So he would give options on all such occasions, which are mentioned in hadith literature. So it specifies that these are all recommendations, but the obligations or the obligatory nature utterances are the ones which the Imam utters loudly.
इसमें जैसे सुभान रब्बियल आला जो हम सजदे में कह रहे हैं, ये भी तो तवातुर से ही हमें मिला है, तो
that is not
क्या इसमें दूसरी भी मिली है? जी,
it has not been handed down through tawatur. As I said, all oral loudly said utterances, they have been handed to us through tawatur. So these are the 5 that I just enumerated that are said loudly. Subhana Rabbiyal Ala is not said loudly, neither is Subhana Rabbiyal Azim. It's something that you whisper or you say to your own self. So all these things, we find that they are narratives which mention that there are other things also that you can say. And in the way that these are mentioned, it becomes apparent that they are recommendations. And the Prophet said, well, you can, if you want, you can say this. If you want, you can say this. So the way he has given these options tells us that he's not making them mandatory.
Sumbul, you may have your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab. Half of my question is answered about saying Subhana Rabbiyal Azim and Subhana Rabbiyal Ala. As it was taught, I thought that it's like it's compulsory, but now if it's optional, there was a number like you should say it at least 3 times. So that would be also optional.
That's also optional. It's not essential to say all these utterances 3 times. You can say 5 times or 7 times. You can say it once. And as I said, you can say any other utterance in your own language as well. Okay. As long as it expresses God's glory, or you express your gratitude to Him, or you express any prayer to Him, any dua or supplication.
So I assume that this is one of the recommendations by Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
All right, Numan Khan, you may ask your question now.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर.
वालेकुम अस्सलाम.
सर मुझे तकब्बुर की वाज़ेह डेफिनेशन बता दे, मतलब इधर तकब्बुर की डेफिनेशन सर.
I mean, it's a common word. It's like when you ask me what does anger mean, everyone knows what anger means. When you ask me that what does regarding oneself to be humble mean, so these are common Urdu Arabic words. Takabbur, of course, means arrogance, that you think more of yourself than you actually are. You put up a show of superiority before other people, something that don't have those attributes, and you portray in front of other people as if you are a superior person. So the superiority complex, of course, or to pose oneself as superior before others, this is what arrogance is.
I hope you have received your answer. Naveed Irfan, you may ask your question and then I'll take the last question by Mr. Tariq Javed. Go ahead.
जी, मेरा सवाल है, जब अल्लाह ने कुरान में कहा कि हमने ये अमानत जो है पहाड़ों को पेश करी, तो उन्होंने मना कर दिया, लेकिन इंसान ने इसे उठा लिया. एक तो ये अमानत क्या है, और दूसरा फिर ये अल्लाह ताला ने दूसरी मखलूक को अगर पेश करी, तो क्या उनके पास शऊर था कि वो डिसीजन ले सकें कि हम इसे लें कि नहीं?
So it was this trust or amana of free will, expressing free will, or what we call as freedom to express one's will, which only human beings took the responsibility. And yes, the answer is that all things that we regard to be as they have no cognizance, for example, the earth or the heavens, whom we regard as absolutely dead objects, this is not so in the case of the Almighty's conversation with them. So when the Almighty conversed with them, they understood what He meant, and He gave this option to the mountains and to the heavens and the earth, that if you would like, that I can give you this trust or this responsibility of expressing your will, the ikhtiyar, the chance to do what you would like to. And they said that, well, we are not equipped for that, we would not like to do that. But the Quran tells us that Hamalahal Insan, the human being said that, well, I'm going to accept this challenge. And the Quran tells us, Innahu kana zaluman jahula, because he accepted this challenge because he is one who becomes overcome with emotions and who exceeds limits. So a person who has this emotional upbringing, or this fact that he is overcome by emotions and who crosses the limits, because human beings have this trait, so they just leapt to this offer and they accepted it. The earth and the mountains and the heavens, as that verse says, they said, well, we don't have the wherewithal or the courage to accept it. So yes, they do have that level of cognizance.
Shehzad, I have a written question. They are asking about verse 7 of Surah Duha that says that we found you searching for the way. And they ask, which way does this ayah connote?
So the verse is وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى. Of course, he was searching for detailed guidance. He was sitting on the crossroads where the Jews and the Christians had lost that guidance. Their own scriptures had they had lost their original scripture. They just had translations. So yes, the conception of the Creator was there in the mind of the Prophet. He knew that there's going to be a day of accountability, but he was searching for detailed guidance. That how can I earn the pleasure of the Almighty? How can I connect with the Almighty? So this verse actually reflects that very situation, that the Prophet had an idea that there is a God. He had an idea that he would be held accountable. He had an idea that there would be a day of accountability. But these were all three basic tenets which every person has in his own intuition. So he wanted more. More detailed guidance. So this is what has been referred to in Surah Duha. That we found you a person searching for the truth, fahada, and then the Almighty guided him towards that truth.
Thank you, Shehzad. Ms. Tariq Javed, you may ask the question now, and that will be the concluding question for today.
Okay. Actually, it's not a question, it's just a comment. I just noted that there have been so many questions regarding the Salah, what we should read, what is mandatory and what's not mandatory. So many questions. So my comment would be, I attended one of the courses with one of the Al-Mawrid fellows, Mr. Abu Yahya. It's about 10 lectures. You can join the class or you can see the class on the YouTube. It's very well elaborated. What are the options? There are 6 or 7 options, like what we can read in Sajda or like that. And these are also available in Sargamdi's book, Mizan. So the people can read that.
Okay, thank you very much for this information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, inshallah, we'll meet in tomorrow's session. Thank you, Roger.